welcome. We're so happy to have you. My name is Suzanne Shaw. I'm the Community Programs Manager here at Automation Anywhere. I'll be hosting the session initially. Would love for everyone to give us a quick introduction in the chat. So as our participants are joining, if you don't mind giving us your name, your title, your organization, and where you're located. Preston, welcome from Toledo. Glad to have you. Good morning, Dave. So happy to have you guys. We'll just let everyone do their brief introductions, and then we'll get started here in just a minute. Adam, real quick, do you want to do a sound check?
Yeah.
Oh, got you. Okay, awesome.
Sorry about that.
Hi, Hans, welcome back. Glad to see you. Great. Leah. We have Iowa, Delaware, Massachusetts, Netherlands, Toledo. Got a couple from Ohio, Denver, all over. We've got a global audience. It's always really fun. I'm going to go ahead and do my quick introduction. As again, everyone who's joining, give us a few just blurbs of where you work, what your title is, and where you live would be great. And I'll go ahead and start my section. So first of all, welcome to the last session of our first annual Pathfinder community camp and our generative AI showcase. We're really excited to have you all here. And it's always great to see familiar names and have the opportunity to have new community members joining the events. As I mentioned before, my name is Suzanne Shaw, and I have the privilege of being the Community Programs Manager here at Automation Anywhere. A little bit about the Pathfinder community. So common definition for Pathfinder is one who discovers a way, especially one that explores untraversed regions to mark out a new route. You, our Automation Anywhere global community of leaders, our Pathfinders and the community team is here to be one of your partners in automation, acceleration, and success. We'll be doing this annually. This is our mid-year community symposium, really intended to help propel you all to the end of your year mission success and marks the next chapter of our community partnership. The Automation Pathfinder program is your flight map, getting you ready for your automation mission success. It's developed with over 20 years of firsthand automation expertise across thousands of use cases. Each mission is calibrated to serve as your blueprint for best practices to achieve scalable growth, measurable value, and long-term sustainability. Don't miss out on the action. For those of you who have joined our previous sessions this week, we've had a ton of really great resources, great conversations, and we're really excited to propel into the rest of the year with the tools and resources we provided as part of our daily flight plans. I will be linking a few resources as well as events in the chat. Don't miss out on our bot game season 4, which is an AI edition. And we're really excited to get started with today's session on automation pipeline. I'm going to pass the hosting baton over to you, Mark. Mark Goodaire, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suzanne, and welcome everyone. Super excited about this session. I like all things Pathfinder, but if I had to pick a favorite, this might be one of them. I think ultimately it's if the automation program is a vehicle, the fuel for it is ideas. And so really we're talking about the ideas or opportunities to automate. So pretty excited about that. Just by way of a quick introduction, my name is Mark Goodaire, and I've been with Automation Anywhere a little over 4 years. I spent the first approximately 3 years in professional services. I may have worked with some of you on the line. So I worked in a number of different geographies, helping customers with different challenges, including scale. And just a little over a year ago, I took over in this new role where I'm leading our internal automation program. So that may or may not be surprising to you, but we absolutely drink our own champagne within Automation Anywhere. We have our own automation program, and I lead that center of excellence, which is cool because it means I can absolutely relate to the journey that all of you are taking. And I'm super excited today because I'm joined with 2 new friends, Tim and Adam. I'm going to let them introduce themselves quickly. So Tim, if you want to give a quick introduction to yourself and the exciting automation program that you have at the Venetian.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So my name is Tim Long. I lead the digital and data services team at the Venetian Resort in Las Vegas. Our primary focus is basically using technology, emerging technology to streamline business and using data to make better business decisions. Prior to that, I was with DuPont, which is a large chemical manufacturer. We were working in their digital transformation department. We were focusing on RPA, machine learning, HoloLens, AI, VR, AR, that kind of stuff. And then prior to that, I was with BlackRock, doing data and analytics for their business strategy department, but also we got into RPA. So that's where I first got into the field.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you and welcome, Tim. Thanks so much for being here for this this conversation.
Yeah.
And we've got Adam as well from Boston Scientific. Adam, do you want to give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Yeah, so Adam Fabro, I manage the HR technology team here at Boston Scientific. I've been here since 2019. I came to stand up the IA team here for our HR department, but prior to that, I was also working at Dell EMC as a RPA developer since around 2015. So been with AA for a little bit now.
Fantastic. Very, very cool. Thank you both for joining us. And it's neat, very different industries. And I know that there's some similarities, but also some key differences in kind of the journey you guys are taking with automation. So super excited about this conversation. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's get into some of the questions. First question is as we talked about, ultimately this comes down to automation ideas. If we don't have automation ideas, if we don't identify those opportunities, we can't execute on it and deliver automation. So first question is, where do you source your automation ideas from? What are your sources for automation ideas? I'm going to go to Tim on this first, and I think we probably also have a poll so that all of you that are attending can also answer this question. So Tim, where do you get your automation ideas from?
Yeah, for me, I know there's different opinions. Some people like to crowdsource, go from the bottom up. Some people like to work with the executive team and go top down. My sweet spot is right in the middle, right? So we have a digital champion advocacy program where we designate people from different functions that aren't so high up that they don't really understand the day-to-day pain points of the team, but they're high enough up where they can actually affect change. Mm-hmm. So that's really the group of people that I like to focus on. So we meet once a month. We talk about different innovation ideas, and then we have a steering committee. We review our backlog, prioritize, and kind of go from there.
Very cool. Very cool. So somewhere, as you said, two different approaches might be kind of top down and bottom up. You guys are kind of in the middle, going towards kind of middle management. Is that pretty safe to say, to try and find those ideas?
Yeah, I would say middle management, but definitely somebody who understands the day-to-day. Right. I know, there's some more sophisticated ways of doing it. I rely on my business partners. I know some people are getting into more automated process discovery. I haven't gotten there yet, but I hope to in the future.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm keeping an eye on the pool here, but meanwhile, Adam, do you want to give a quick comment on that same question? Where do you guys get your automation ideas from?
Yeah, so we do a lot just strictly from the business. So we're a federated model. So all of HR development is done inside of our team. So we rely on the SMEs within inside of the HR function to submit their different ideas. And it's going out similar to what Tim does, teaching people what RPA can do or what automation can do so that they can start thinking and getting the gears spinning on ideas so that they could submit through a formal intake process.
Very cool. Very cool. I think we've probably got some poll results. Suzanne, is it possible for us to see that? I'm interested in, for the attendees, where they're getting their ideas from. If we're able to share that, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so I am sharing, but the attendees can see it, but we had about 25% of people are using some form of technology to document, and 75% as of now are not.
Really interesting. That's awesome. Thanks, Suzanne. So that's interesting. I think last time, I don't know how many of you have attended Imagine, but one thing this is one point that kind of surprised me and I found really interesting. When we looked at the different customers that were showcasing their automation programs last year at Imagine, we really did have some organizations that they were basically different ends of the spectrum. I remember one organization had lots of success scaling. Everything was really top down. So they got in a boardroom and said, hey, what are all of our key enterprise cross-functional processes? Let's automate them. And they had lots of success. And then another organization did basically none of that. It was completely kind of crowdsourced. So they put up a portal and said, hey, we need ideas. And then they selected from those. So that's another important point, I think, that there isn't necessarily any one right answer. I don't know if you and Tim and Adam would agree with that. There could be different approaches to getting those ideas.
Yeah, there's definitely different ways of doing it.
Awesome.
Sorry, Mark, I'm going to go ahead and actually launch the second poll question on where the primary source of automation ideas are coming from the group, and then you can kind of reference back to that as well.
That's fantastic. On that last poll question, I know Tim, you mentioned you haven't used too much technology in that area. Adam, have you used any technology, things like process discovery in terms of finding ideas? Not yet?
We haven't. So we do a lot with the service center. So a lot of our prioritization or how we target automations is based off of volumes that the service center is producing, because we obviously pay per transaction. And if we're targeting the highest level transactions, then we're going to hit the biggest numbers with that. So that's how we do a lot of our prioritization.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, we within Automation Anywhere within our program, we a couple of quarters ago was the first time that we actually used process discovery, our process discovery product. So we actually used it in and around our kind of business development, our XDR area. So we deployed process discovery to 7 or 8 different roles globally of individuals that were, at least in theory, doing the same kind of work. And it was a really, really interesting exercise for us. Again, another example of kind of drinking our own champagne. We wanted to try it and see how it worked ourselves. The analysis was really interesting. I mean, within a couple of days of starting to record the data, we immediately identified a kind of anomaly. It was like, of the 8 people, what is happening in this specific geography? Something, the behavior seemed very different. So there were discussions after that about, things like process standardization. It really didn't have directly anything to do with automation. It was just some kind of process standardization discussions. And then we ultimately came up with some automation opportunities as well. So we had some success with process discovery, and definitely worth investigating for those of you that are attending. That's
Mark,
awesome.
did you have any pushback from the business when you're looking at process discovery, whether it's the big brother looking over your shoulder, monitoring what you're doing, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's a great point. So, that was after our acquisition of Fortress IQ, that product. So that team had just joined us. Fortunately, they had a lot of industry experience in this specific area, so they were able to kind of help us. And I think the question that you're asking, Adam, I kind of wrap up in the expression change management. So we did spend some time thinking about those concerns and taking the time to really describe why we're doing it. I think some organizations and some employees in other organizations have implemented things like productivity tools that have made some people nervous. What we did was actually we worked with our legal team and some other folks and actually documented some things like policies in and around this that we could communicate to the whole workforce. And again, really the intent was to say, this is why we're doing it. Very clearly, why are we doing it? We're doing it because we drink our own champagne. We want to identify those efficiencies. We want to identify automation opportunities. And we want all of us to be able to be more effective in our work. So we put out some communication around that. To be honest, in our experience, most of the concerns kind of faded away once they understood why we were doing it and that it was in kind of all of our best interest. But we didn't take that for granted. We did take the time to craft some communication and make sure that we were all kind of aligned on what we were doing and why we were doing it. And we also shared the outcome with them. At the end of it, it wasn't like we just disappeared. We came back and said, hey guys, thanks for your support of the program. Here were our findings. What do you guys think? Which I think is important. Awesome. Great question. So poll results, it's interesting if you guys can see it. Interesting. Looks like about 75% of the respondents said that the ideas were kind of bottom up from employees. I think the next biggest one was process discovery, and then automation roadmaps. That's another interesting one. It looks like about 8% are using automation roadmaps, which to me are kind of like that top-down approach. Really, really interesting.
Hey, Mark, there is a question about process discovery and some security and sensitive data. Do you want to address that at all?
Sure. I guess the one thing I'd say is you're not alone. We were in the same, again, we had exactly the same concerns. So for example, depending on what we were recording, there might be some sensitive data there. So in our case, for example, are we dealing with financial data or data in the HR area, sensitive financial data, things like that, customer data? We have the same concerns. So a couple things. First of all, and I think this is a good principle, we didn't start out with automating a process that had the most sensitive data. So we specifically just to get our feet wet, we started off with a process that didn't have those kind of data sensitivities. Number one. Number two, we really again experimented with the product and made sure we had good experience to understand all the capabilities around that. Our process discovery product is pretty slick in terms of its ability to do things like redact sensitive data. So we spent the time to configure that. We even, this is another common question. We even did things like configure the platform to say, what did we not want to record? So I'll give you an example. Maybe in your workforce, people sometimes do something personal on their laptop. Maybe they do some personal email or they do some personal web banking and things like that. We had that discussion and we said, look, again, we are not trying to record data that we don't want to be recording. So we excluded that stuff. We said something like, hey, everyone, if you're going to do that, use this browser and we're not recording it. And that's what we did. If you're going to do the personal stuff during this period, that kind of stuff, use Edge, but we're going to record Chrome. We did something like that. Really good question. So I'd say the product has pretty strong capabilities from a security and things like redaction of sensitive data standpoint. And we took some additional steps just to say, we're going to be really crisp and clear about what we're recording and what we are absolutely not recording. Nobody's trying to make your personal web banking more efficient. So we didn't even record that yet.
Yeah, and just to add what you said, Mark, most products do give the employee the chance to review their submissions before they send it. So it really is at their control. It's not a big brother tool at all. Right.
No, for sure. I mean, our product, there's a big pause button. If somebody wants to, first of all, they know when it's recording and there's a big pause button if somebody really did want to do it. But, again, with communication, with making all this stuff clear, I think a lot of the concerns go away because they know that we actually are thinking about it and we're just being transparent, which I just, that's a good rule in general, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also the aspect of your InfoSec team, right? The employees is one thing. Your InfoSec team, getting them comfortable is a completely different conversation.
100%. So we had to bring them and we actually had our whole legal team. They were along for the ride as well. That's a really good point, having that partnership. So beyond getting ideas, one of the things that can happen when we ask for ideas is, you have to be careful what you ask for, you might get it. Sometimes we end up with a flood of ideas. Now what? And typically we all have some kind of resource constraints. So this is a kind of different question I'm going to throw at you, Adam, which is when you get lots of those automation opportunities or ideas, how do you really put your finger on the best ideas, the ones that you actually want to execute and maybe automate, as quickly as possible? How, from that big pool of ideas, how do you identify the best ones?
Yeah, a lot of times it's looking at the ROI, but there's also times where there's that low-hanging fruit where if you t-shirt size it, there's not going to be a lot of effort in terms of development, and it'll be a quick win for the team to maybe save a couple headcount or a couple hours worth of work. So if you can squeak those in while you're developing something else, a bigger process, then obviously that's all the better. But a lot of the times it's really just looking at pure ROI and what value it's going to bring to the team.
Awesome. Kind of bang for the buck. How much are we going to get for the effort? Tim, what about you? Any thoughts on that topic?
No, I actually agree with Adam. The low-hanging fruit's not something I typically attack right off the bat. Well, let me rephrase that. It's not something I typically attack now. Right off the bat, it is something I attack because I want to build trust. So I want to do something easy and deliver quickly. But as you get into those home runs where it's a medium, low complexity process, big, huge returns, I typically like to do those small, low hanging fruit when my developers have downtime.
Right. Use that capacity when they're in between sprints or whatever it is. Yeah. No, that's
or if they hit a roadblock. Yeah.
If somebody's got a blocker.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That makes lots of sense. I think herein lies the challenge. I think that's one of the important things here is to your point, Adam. If we want to identify ROI, it's how good are we at that discipline of assessing the effort and then assessing the value, right? So that's a topic in and of itself. We may have time in this session to get a little bit into that, but if we can't articulate the value, it's really tough to know what's going to come out the other end if we put in whatever effort. Very, very good. The other thing that we've noticed, and I'm interested to know from all the participants today and from you, Adam and Tim, are there any other criteria that are coming in when you're identifying the best ideas? For example, you guys have probably heard of this new thing called generative AI. I'm guessing you guys have heard something about that, something about this ChatGPT thing and all of these different solutions. A lot of conversation about that. That's something that's starting to impact, in a positive way, but that's impacting our own automation program. So for example, in addition to what you mentioned, Adam, we're always looking at that lens of effort and risk against the value we're getting. But now another criteria is kind of, are there opportunities to showcase those capabilities as well? Obviously, we hope that there's some additional value to come out the other end, but it's like, is there some inherent value just to the innovation, just to the fact that we really do need to get some real experience in these kind of technologies? Adam or Tim, any quick thoughts on that? Is that something that's starting to come in?
I am a huge experimenter. I love doing POCs. I'm constantly trying to add new tools to my tool belt.
Right.
Any chance I get to do a proof of concept on a new technology, I do it. You got to keep the lights on. You got to run your department. You got to run your function. But it's important to stay ahead of the curve and test those new technologies and see how it can impact the business. Absolutely.
How about you, Adam?
Yeah, it's actually interesting you brought this up. This week, we actually had a meeting in our Marlborough office where CHRO came up to us at lunch, and she was asking about ChatGPT and how it's going to impact our world in the future. And she's been using it herself. So it's definitely going to be things that we have to look at from like a proof of concept perspective, like Tim was just chatting through, something that you have to look for. But obviously, the main goal is to keep the lights on, get through the automation backlog that you have currently, but also at the same time, how can we look at leveraging other technologies at the same time?
Absolutely. And no, it's an interesting topic. The other thing I'd say is when I look at something like generative AI, one of the ways that I look at it is it should be an accelerator for me, and it should give me, to your point, Adam, it should have good ROI. In other words, I'm looking at like how can we use generative AI in a way that, hey, that's a lot less effort. It's giving me a lot, instead of writing a bunch of custom code in Python or in a bot. It's giving me something that's cheap. In other words, it's got a significant amount of value with relatively easy use. We've got functionality built right in the product, so you can easily consume ChatGPT, for example. So I think that's important, right? If it shouldn't be adding a bunch of overhead. The exciting part about it is the value should come without a bunch of effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
One more thing on that topic. I know we don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of talking about ChatGPT, but one of the things I'm most excited for is just its ability to enable average business users to build their own automation, right? So like just speaking in natural language, to say your RPA bots and say like, hey, go process this invoice for me, and they go do it, right? Or they build this automation that does this, and this, and then it builds the code right out for you. I think there's huge opportunity to just enable the business to self-service.
At 100%, absolutely, and yeah, we're going through the same thing. And while just like we do with with an automation program, while we also mitigate the risk, right? So just like we just talked about with process discovery, the same kind of questions come up in terms of making sure that we've got the right guardrails and data sensitivity and the right policies and things like that in place. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much fire and excitement about it. It's awesome. We just launched another poll. I don't know if Tim and Adam, if you can see the results there, if everyone can see those. So this question was about what factors specifically you use to consider, what automations to build. Really, really interesting. So 89%, no big surprise there. That's kind of the ROI bit about how much value are we going to get. Interested to see second place was complexity effort. That's kind of completes the ROI equation. And 58%, I guess that was the third, potential business value. That's one I always look at, and I in my experience, sometimes we forget about that one. I don't know if you guys have had the same experience, but we've had lots of situations where, in the spirit of agile, we're trying to get something into production that provides some immediate benefit, but the roadmap, the potential for it may be way bigger. We're going to roll this automation out to 15 people, but we know there's another 100 waiting on it. So that's why that piece of immediate value versus potential, I think, is important. Is that something you guys consider as well, kind of the future or potential value?
Yeah, for us, a lot of the stuff that we automate is US first, then we push out global. Our biggest population is in the US, but we have a huge population in Ireland, like 8,000 employees in Ireland, and then around the globe as well. So a lot of the times what we do is start US based and then push it out global. Or if we can align globally before we even automate it in the US, then obviously we'll look towards that too.
Right. Tim, any thoughts on that one? Same thing?
Me, not so much, and let me tell you why. So the Venetian used to be part of a global company. Unfortunately, the tech stacks at each of the company were very different. So it was hard to replicate processes across regions and different properties. We have seen some opportunity where we can reuse the same code across functions, but it's very rare, and we're a fixed property. So it's not like, we're getting into this business and we're going to see a lot of demand on this side. So, we're confined within four walls. So our volume's our volume. We only have so many rooms. So it's not really something that I consider too much.
That's okay. Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of delivery channels, and that might be an expression that not everybody uses. But when I mean delivery channel, essentially I mean who's actually going to deliver the automation. So examples of delivery channels might be you might call it something different, but you might have some kind of, let's call it a center of excellence or COE. You might have that kind of structure. You might have some capability that's in a federated model in terms of in the business units, citizen developers. You may work with partners. Within Automation Anywhere, we have all those channels happening. So I'm interested, Tim and Adam, maybe we'll start with Adam first. Do you have a variety of different channels in place? And if so, how do you make that decision in terms of who's going to deliver what automation? Any thoughts on that?
So ours is federated, so the functional teams have their own. So HR has their own COE, finance has their own COEs, and projects are prioritized based off of what their needs are. So in our COE, 90% of the automations are created by developers sitting inside of our IA COE inside of HR. But there's also times where we have automations that are low-hanging fruit where we can have someone that sits inside of the HR function and is more of a technical resource that can jump in and do like a stretch assignment on projects, similar to what I would call a citizen developer, where they have some technical capabilities, not a lot of experience in the RPA, but want to learn it. So we'll have them jump on a project so that they can understand how to use the technology as well.
Oh, that's super interesting. So it sounds like kind of a case-by-case basis based on a number of factors, including, what would you say, like availability, capability of the resource?
Yeah, bandwidth is a big thing. Sure. I call it citizen development light. It's like the free version of citizen development.
Right. Gotcha. All right. Thanks, Adam. Tim, you have different delivery channels in place. Is that something you guys have in place? And if so, how do you make that decision?
No. Well, kind of, right? So we're a centralized COE. So my team serves the entire organization. We do have offshore developers that we can kick over work to. We are looking at getting into citizen development, but we're just tipping our toe into the water. So I have one person who specializes in QA automation, getting trained up on Automation Anywhere, and that's going to be our first test subject of citizen development. And we're also waiting to migrate to A360 before we do that, because I don't want people building code in version 11 when that's going to go away.
You got to migrate it, right?
Yeah.
No, that's very cool. We've been ourselves on an interesting journey, and I guess the simple way I view that is we're always looking at kind of what the capability is of that channel versus the automation. Maybe that sounds simple, but each of our delivery channels, we've got different capabilities. So, for example, we've got, even within our citizen developers, we've got some that are, they could join the COE tomorrow. They're very, very capable, and then we've got others that are quite new. So, complexity obviously would be a key factor there in terms of where we would assign certain work. And I'd say risk is another one. Again, like we were just talking about, all these, when you get into sensitivities around data and PII and things like that, some of that stuff we keep closer to the COE. Again, just because of the sensitivities and the not great things that can go wrong around some of those initiatives. Sometimes we keep those closer to the COE. And then kind of to your point, Adam, we're always trying to keep it as close to where the action is from a federated standpoint. Where's the expertise on the process? Where are the expertise on those systems tends to be closer to the business units that are actually dealing with it. Yeah. Really interesting. Thank you for that. We've talked a little bit about this, but prioritization. So if you've got 10 use cases that you all think are appropriate for one of those delivery channels you've got, what are some factors that come into play in terms of prioritization? I think one thing we talked about was overall ROI. Anything else that comes in terms of why you pick one use case over another? Adam, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, during COVID, it was an interesting time. We kind of scrapped the whole ROI model and moved more towards bandwidth support, because we were finding that either people were out sick with COVID or whatever the situation was. We would try to free up capacity to those full-time employees by creating automation. So sometimes we'd push something ahead of something with higher value on an ROI perspective, just so that we could help support the business.
Right. Tim, thoughts about that one? Anything else? That's an interesting point. Anything else outside of ROI that would help in terms of how you prioritize one use case over another?
Yeah. So, I mean, with this particular position, we're really close to the guests, right? So typically in our steering committees, we present these ideas to the VP, one of the VPs, right? And at the end of the day, it's their decision how they want to prioritize, because we're a service organization. But
right.
We do tend to prioritize, even if it's not a great labor savings, if there's guest improvement opportunities there. Like, say we do track like our feedback from our guests, and if we see areas where we're getting bad scores and we can build an automation to try to improve those scores, we will go and attack that area over something else that we might maybe save a little bit more labor, because the number one focus is on the customers, on the guests.
Now that's an interesting point too, Tim. So it's kind of back to this. We haven't discussed this too much, but the different value drivers, right? It's not just about productivity, but what are the other types of business value we might get? Like you just mentioned, a big one, things like customer sat. And I think one of the things you get into there is, I don't know if you guys have this experience, but in some cases, it's clear that it's an important automation, even if it's not necessarily easy to quantify the benefit. So I'm going to throw out something like there's a risk that needs to be mitigated. Yeah, we put lots of smart people together, and it may be tough to quantify, but like everyone looks at each other and says, we got to handle this. It's related to compliance or regulatory or our positioning in the market. We want to be first in this area. Yeah, nobody can give a number to it, but it just floated to the top. How about the CEO wants it tomorrow? Maybe he knows something we don't know. So can you guys resonate with that as well?
Yeah. So when I was in the financial side of things, operation exceptions were a big deal, right? Because if we would make an op error, we would have to pay our customers a certain amount of money, like in the millions, to correct that error. So risk reduction in that job was our primary focus.
Gotcha. No, that's a great example. It's a great example. We consider, like our COE, we consider ourselves customer zero. So we get early releases of our product because we want to make sure that folks like you, Tim and Adam, don't go through pain that's unnecessary. So we want to experience it. And so one of the criteria for us, again, is things like emerging technology, emerging product functionality. So for example, when things like RE came to the product, We wanted to be the first out of the gate to experience that. What's that experience like in terms of doing that? Embedded automation, our automation copilot, we wanted to be right out of the gate. So we've had situations where, do something using that functionality was a good enough criteria to kind of float higher than other things that might have better numbers from an ROI standpoint. We did the same thing with generative AI. We wanted to pretty much immediately use that package that we added to the product and make sure that we had something out there for generative AI. That's interesting.
Mark, do you actively provide feedback to your product team when you play with these new functions?
100%. We and Tim, again, this is kind of opening the curtain on us internally, but in some of my past roles, I'd say we didn't always have a real strong bridge there. But I would say in this group, in our center of excellence, we're in constant touch with them. And that can be things like, for sure, it can be things like, we found a product bug. If something like that occurs, it can be things like that. But it's not just about kind of QAing the functionality. It's also about the actual experience. Is it helping us deliver better automation faster? What's the actual experience like? We have lots of discussions about things like, is it clear? Is the user experience optimized? Is the developer experience optimized? Because again, just like you guys are, we're doing that, all day, every day. So we provide that feedback as well. So,
great.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that's important. One piece of, I don't know if you guys have used this functionality, Tim. I don't think you're at Automation 360 yet, but an example of that would be we provided feedback a while back around things like code reviews being a bit of a laborsome process. And so we worked with the product team, and if you see Automation 360 these days, it's got static code analysis baked in, and there's a good roadmap for it as well. So that instead of manually going through line by line and saying, that's not our naming convention for the variables, or you're missing error handling, the product just says, you've got 7 issues in this code. That's an example of something where we really collaborated closely with product, and I personally have been thrilled to see that come into the product. Awesome. Tim, I want to go to you on this question. The whole management of the pipeline, we've got different ways that we can do that, even from a technology standpoint. And even for the participants on the line right now, there might be different systems that people are using. Can you let us know a little bit about how you manage it from a technology standpoint? How do you manage your automation pipeline?
Sure. Let me actually share my video, and I can kind of show you what we do.
Great.
How do I do that? Oh, share screen.
I think we've got an open poll on that topic as well for what tools or technology that folks use to manage their pipeline.
Can you see my main screen? Is it coming through?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Yeah. So so we try to work as agile as possible. It's hard to deliver bots in thin slices. So we're more agile, but I found success with some of the more agile project management tools like Jira and DevOps. So for me, we create user stories that basically represent projects, right? Like these are our user stories. They have descriptions, ROI, some value metrics, some other reporting metrics, right? So this makes it really easy for me to do my management reporting. And then I basically can bake that into a dashboard. You can see like what's in my pipeline, what's in development, what's been completed. We used to just base the program on repurposeful hours, so that's why there's a focus here, but we've kind of evolved to see other benefits, but we can see like use cases by department. And then down here is kind of something that's relevant. Like, so, once we do the initial intake and I have a session with the teams to basically just go over the process, see if it's a good candidate, and I'll add it to my backlog, right? And then I'll give it a confidence level and a PDD status, right? Like finalized, not started. So I can tell in my backlog how many hours I have there and my confidence. You can see I have a majority of low confidence in my backlog right now, but that's okay. And then the magic of this really gets down to the sprints, right? So these user stories get attached to tasks as well as enhancements and bugs. And my team can work in one environment and see everything from a reporting standpoint, but then I can also manage my dev team inside this tool.
Very cool. Tim, so can you comment a little bit more about the concept of confidence? So what would be an example of a low confidence scenario, and then how do you handle those use cases? Is there some way how do you boost your confidence?
Well, I mean, low confidence would be a highly complex automation that involves like human intuition or just a tremendous amount of effort relative to the value it provides. Usually those just sit in my backlog, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, I wish I had a better way to, those processes typically involve process reengineering, and that's a very labor intensive process to do that.
No, that's super helpful. And thanks for kind of bringing back the curtain and showing us how you manage that within the Venetian. That's really interesting, Tim. Thanks. Adam, any comments on that in terms of how you guys handle this from what technology would you use?
Yeah, similar. So we use a form for intake, and then it goes into a Jira backlog, and then you move in sprints.
Okay.
Through Jira.
No, that's really interesting. So if you look at the poll results, interesting. So the winner is other, which is fascinating. For those of you that are on the chat, love to know what the other is. Love to know what options there are here. 34% using Excel. I think Excel is here to stay. I think it seems to be a pretty reliable technology on the planet. So other seems to be leading, followed by Excel spreadsheets, and then Jira. And it looks like we've got COE Manager, which is our product, also coming up there. We just recently started using COE Manager for our internal program. And one of the nice things about COE Manager is it's integrated with our product, which means you can tie back kind of plan versus actual savings and value. That's one of the pieces we're most excited about, because it actually ties to the control room. So we can say we expected this much value because this automation was going to run 100 times a month. It actually ran 90 times a month, or it actually ran 150 times a month. So we can kind of do that analysis. So yeah, we've been using COE Manager, but for those in the chat, love to know what the other is.
So
Suzanne,
there's quite a few from SharePoint, which somebody, I think it was Hans that said it's a glorified version of Excel, right? Oh no, it was Jack. Jack said that. And then AHA moving to ADO. And then custom Power Apps is also on there. Azure, DevOps, and Smartsheets.
very interesting. So it's a pretty diverse tool set. Well, it's really, really, really interesting. Before I know time's getting short, but one last poll that we did that I thought was interesting. If you guys can see the question number 5, this one I thought was also interesting. So who was involved in actually assessing the ideas? I think this is interesting. So 80% of the time we involve the requester of the idea. That's interesting. So 20% of the respondents here don't involve the requester. That's interesting. It looks like 69% involving some kind of process SME. We call those process champions. Little less than half the time COE representative. That may be for organizations that don't have or operate as a COE. And then 20% other. Again, interested in the chat. Who else is involved in the actual assessment? Is it some layer of management or executives? Who else is involved in assessing the ideas? Tim and Adam, any thoughts on that poll for question 5? Does that resonate with your experience in terms of who you involve?
For us, it's the SMEs who are generally the requester. So it's a little bit of both for that one.
Gotcha. Tim, similar for you, or what do you think?
Well, unfortunately, I'm heavily involved in that process, as well as we usually bring in the SME, and then also the digital champion that works with that department. So those are usually the 3 people we bring into those conversations, and my developers. I typically like to involve them as well in case there's something that they see that I don't.
Gotcha. Yeah, we internally have kind of run the gamut of different scenarios here. It's like all these things, it's such a delicate balance. It's like the more people involved in it, you get into this democratic process where just trying to find people's calendar availability. If there's 4 or 5 people to assess an idea, can be a challenge. But so we've kind of been honing this over time. But we now involve, we didn't always do this, but we involve what we call the application custodian or the application owner. So for example, if we use Workday, for example, for HR and finance, if we're going to automate something in Workday, we pull in some representative from that team, which in our case is on the IT side, kind of an IT application owner. And the reason we pulled them in is, frankly, a couple times we automated things that then the application owner came back and said, that's native functionality. So nobody in the COE knew that. I'm not a Workday expert, my team weren't, and they didn't know that. But we had that happen a couple times. So now we pull them in early in the curve. And that doesn't mean just because there's a native way of doing it in the application, that doesn't mean there's not an automation opportunity, but we at least want to know that going in so we can kind of measure the trade-off. So that's one person that we brought in. And we used to also not have as much emphasis on the process SME. We started off working more or less exclusively with the requester, and then we ran into the issues that can come with that. Sometimes the requester doesn't have the same overall understanding of the process. So we had situations where somebody might request something and maybe there's 99 other people in a similar function. We really need somebody that's got the overall process view to say, oh, no, we don't need to automate that in this way because we've got some additional, process changes coming that you don't know about, and they bring in that additional dimension. So, and we ourselves have been kind of honing that to make sure that we get the right stakeholders involved without slowing down the process to a point that's not workable. So,
yeah, I think the big issue is not negatively impacting the systems downstream that your automations are working into, because, like you said, we're not the experts in the systems that you're creating automations in. So how would we know if we're going to negatively impact something downstream?
Totally. Yeah, exactly. That application is going to be upgraded in a month. Oh, thanks for letting us know we were about to start developing. So exactly. Well, that's awesome. Tim, any other thoughts on that topic, on that final pool?
No, I was going to say, yeah, I totally agree. The application owner is the first call I make when I get a process that I'm about to do. And there have been plenty of times that they say, that's just native functionality. And I say, okay, that's a win for me. I don't have to do any work. And I'm taking credit for that. So it's definitely a great idea to involve them as well. Even the vendor, right? Sometimes the vendor might have that in their pipeline.
Yes.
I've had those situations where we had to wait a week for something that would have took us a month to build.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. Just doing a quick time check. I think I personally have really enjoyed the conversation. I think we're coming to that time. Tim and Adam, thank you so much for joining me today. Any final thoughts on this topic before we sign off? All good?
Mark, I do have one question, and I know this is kind of crossing over from previous conversations, but I think I do think it's still relevant, especially as we're trying to build, pipeline and evaluation of automation. But Leah asked, how do you assess the individual capabilities when utilizing citizen developers? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but do any of you have any additional kind of insight knowing when and how you involve them?
It's a great question. Tim or Adam, any thoughts?
So for us, we typically target those people who are either really good in Excel, that have experience doing like VLOOKUPs or pivot tables as such inside of the HR realm, which are few and far between. But those are the ones that we'll target. But from an automation perspective, when we do the analysis or the original intake, that's where we'll assess how much level of effort there will be on the developer side. And that's where we will peg it as something that'll be a low-hanging fruit, or this is going to be extremely difficult to automate.
Cool. Tim, it sounds like assessment of capability of your citizen developers. Is that something you guys have a methodology?
It's something I'm just getting into. I mean, first step is I make them get developer certified. I like folks that have a technical background, especially when I'm starting out, and I want to give them a process that if their bot breaks, it has zero impact to the business. So that's where we start. And I also give them full reign to work with my professional developers to help them, because that's the only way that they're going to improve is learning from somebody who knows it better than them.
Awesome. Suzanne, hopefully that helped. Thank you, Tim.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you all for participating, and thanks for the attendees for your engagement and for being here with us today. We're really excited to have wrapped up our first week of the Pathfinder Community Camp, and excited to see all of the fun AI bot game submissions. So to wrap things up, I'm going to just share a few quick little announcements that are coming up. First thing is that Imagine is coming back, scheduled for September in Austin. We would love for you all to join us if you are able to. There's a quick QR code here. We're giving 50% off as an early bird special. So if that's something you're interested in, we'd love to have you join us. And that's going to be September 19th and 20th. Again, that's in Austin, Texas. Then the last item of business, just to touch base, is, again, we've talked about it on the call today, and it's, you know, all over in the tech world, is AI and how automation is integrating with that. So we're hoping to provide some really great tools and resources moving forward. In addition, on June 1st, we're actually having an entire generative AI event. Would love for you all to join. Check out more information on the website, and look forward to working with you all. Thanks again for joining. We're grateful for your engagement and look forward to seeing you all again. Special thanks to Tim and Adam. You guys have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.